question marks surrounding the Red Sox starting rotation for 2024, but what exactly is that going to look like? Find out more on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby, former ESPN social media associate and also currently the host of the Boston Balling podcast. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is, it's free, so might as well take advantage of free and start your day off the right way with Locked On Red Sox. Locked On is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Welcome to another episode of the show. Today, I am here with a special guest of the Boston Globe, Pete Abraham. I appreciate you hopping on here with me. I always appreciate your content and following along with your work and hearing your insight about the Red Sox. So I'm definitely excited to have you on here to talk some Red Sox with me today. I know it's been just an interesting offseason for this team, kind of a lot of question marks heading into the season. And the biggest one for me still is the starting rotation. You go and acquire Lucas Giolito. He gets injured, has to have surgery, and likely is going to miss probably the whole 2024 season. So now they're looking at a situation where they have Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, and Nick Pivetta as solidified starters in this rotation. But then you have a few guys in the mix that they've kind of been throwing out there that might be in the rotation come opening day. So what are your thoughts on that? Who do you think gets those other spots? Do you think they still have a chance to go out and sign somebody, or do you think they are going to kind of roll with what they have and stick a couple people more in there?
Yeah, I think they're going to roll with what they have. Even if they were to sign somebody now, that person wouldn't be ready for opening day. So right now it's Garrett Whitlock and Tanner Houck and Cooper Criswell and Josh Winckowski competing for two spots. I think Houck seems to have set himself, ahead of the pack a little bit with how well he's pitched in spring training. And after that, it gets a little tricky because Whitlock, over time has been better in relief than he has been in the rotation. They feel very good about Criswell, who's a guy that they signed after he was released. They feel like the analytics show that there's a lot more for him to get. They're working on adding to velocity, and they like his secondary pitches very much. And Winckowski, I think, is a guy who belongs in the bullpen. He was much better in relief than when they tried him as a starter. He got knocked around a little bit against the Phillies yesterday, but he's still in the mix too. So it'll kind of come down, I think, to a couple of those, decisions to be made towards the end of spring training. And one thing I've learned over the years is we get all riled up about who's going to be in the rotation coming out of spring training, and then it changes after a week. So it's, it doesn't really matter who the number 5 starter is because that person is going to change quite a bit. So there's really no reason to get too wrapped up about it. And the other thing is with their schedule, they're going to need a number 6 starter. It's really, we put a lot of time into as reporters who's going to be in the roster for the first day. And then, 2 days later it changes. So it's better to look at it long term. And I do think they have better depth in the rotation this year than they had last year.
Yeah, I feel like there are definitely some options there. My concern still is the innings. Last year, we saw that the starting pitchers were not able to go deep into games as much, and then it significantly affected the bullpen, and it was just a trickle-down effect there. So I'm kind of looking at this rotation and wondering, who's going to be able to provide innings and go deeper into games, because that was something going into this offseason that I was looking for the Red Sox to address and hoped that they would say, okay, we need to, acquire some guys who can go a good solid 5 or 6 innings to just relieve some of that work from the pen.
Yeah, that's what they thought Giolito was, that Giolito could go 180 innings and give them that, kind of week, every 5 days you'll get something good out of a guy like that. Now he's going to be gone for the entire year. They haven't replaced him, so that's a big problem. And they're counting on somebody like Carter Crawford being more than a 5-inning guy. They've talked a lot about him maintaining his stuff and the fact that he's stronger than he was last year. They feel like he could give them more. They need to get more out of Brian Bayo, who did seem to get through the order twice and then lose something on his fastball and his secondary pitches last year. They need more out of him. They need more out of Nick Pivetta, who fell out of the rotation, then came back. He's capable of giving them more innings too. They want to get 25 innings out of one turn of the rotation. So 5 guys, each going 5 innings. And that if somebody goes 4, the next guy needs to go 6. Now, can they do that? I don't know. But it kind of goes to speak to how things have changed for starting pitchers. There was a time, the Red Sox looked at guys and said, okay, we're going to get 7 out of this guy, and then we'll, go to the setup man, then go to the closer, and we'll go home. Now it's just, boy, if only we can get 5, everything will be great. And that's just so much different. So the expectations are low, but I think whether it's Crawford or Pivetta or Bayo, that they think that they can get some innings out of those guys. But having not replaced Giolito, it's going to be a puzzle all year long.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for too. As soon as that news came out about Giolito and the injury, I was saying, where do they go from here? What do they do? Do they bring somebody in from the outside? Because I thought that was the best course of action at that point, because he was supposed to be that guy that they could rely on in that top of the rotation to provide more innings. And then Breslow came out and said, we trust what we have internally. We might have Cooper Criswell get a spot in the rotation. And that indicated to me that they weren't planning on replacing Giolito. So I just really hope that whole scenario doesn't end up backfiring on them as the season progresses.
Well, it's funny. I think the exact opposite thing happened when they lost Giolito. I think they said to themselves, we're not going to spend, we're not going to add to the payroll. We're not going to trade for somebody using prospects. We're just going to try to go forward with what we have. I think if Giolito was healthy and looked good, they might have even said, geez, maybe this is an opportunity for us to contend. We could go out and add somebody else. But once he got hurt, I think they looked at it like, this is going to be a rebuilding year. This is going to be a year to try to work in some young guys, to try to see what we have in Criswell and Winckowski and Crawford and some of the other guys. It's not going to be a year where we're likely to contend. So we're not going to go out and whether it was sign Montgomery, they were never going to sign Blake Snell. But, even like a Michael Lorenzen would have been helpful. But they haven't done that yet either. So I think that the injury to Giolito sort of made them step back and say, we don't think we're going to contend now. So there's no sense in adding more money to the payroll. There's no sense in trading prospects. We're going to just go forward with the guys we have and see what we have. And it also speaks to Breslow being very confident that the pitching program they've put in place with Andrew Bailey and Justin Willard and some of their other guys can produce helpful pitchers. And whether that's, guys from the system, some of the free agents that they've signed, they feel like they can get by with guys like that. And this will be a test of what they're doing with their pitching.
Yeah, and, you bring up a good point there, too, with their pitching development and the staff they've put in place there, because I've talked about this on the show, too, is just pitching development for the Red Sox for a while now has not been the greatest, and they haven't had as much of an ability to develop their pitchers internally. And so that's something that I think they're hoping now to really change. And I do like the guys they put in place to really work with these pitchers and help develop some of those guys that they have in the system so that they can eventually come up and be contributors on the major league roster. And obviously, if you look at pitching depth in the farm system, it still does need work. But I do like the fact that Breslow, in the trades that he has made this offseason, has been focusing on trying to get arms in return so that he can have more of a variety of guys to be part of that overall puzzle in the future of what they're trying to accomplish of having sustainable, reliable pitching.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that more in relief. I think guys like Isaiah Campbell, Greg Weissert, Justin Slayton, I think you're going to be impressed by what some of those guys do. Isaiah Campbell has looked very good in camp, and so has Weissert. And talking to some of the Yankees people the other day when I was up in Tampa, they felt like they gave up some good pitchers to the Red Sox to get Alex Verdugo. And those are the guys I think that when you talk to Breslow, he's excited about, that they can get a lot of production out of those guys in the bullpen. So even if you're only getting 5 innings out of your starter, they feel like they can line up 3 or 4 guys in relief who can be very effective, not just some of the, waiver claim guys that they've had in the past and kind of hope for the best. And I think they feel like these are legitimate young guys with good stuff who can be part of the operation going forward, and you can get a lot out of them.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, I wonder if going into this offseason, they saw 2024 as a rebuilding year to begin with, because you mentioned a lot of these young guys and guys who have the chance to develop and be very successful with this team. And obviously you have guys waiting in the rafters there, like the Marcelo Meyer, Kyle Teal, Roman Anthony types of players who eventually will come up. And it makes me wonder if they really never felt like they were planning to compete in 2024. And they were trying to use it as a rebuilding year and get the pieces in place so that they can compete in 2025 and beyond, because they just weren't really transparent about that in the first place, if that was the case, or if they actually were trying to give a genuine effort to compete this upcoming season, and they just feel like it didn't work out because of the situation with Giolito.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a genuine effort, it wasn't a very good effort because they didn't really do a whole lot. They traded Alex Verdugo for relief pitchers. They didn't go out and add another outfielder. They've done. They're counting on Trevor Story coming back and being good, but they didn't really. They went out and got Grissom for second base. They did some smaller things, but they didn't do the big thing. So Giolito was the biggest thing they did, and then they lost him. So I didn't think. I think they were trying to be better, they probably couldn't have been much worse, but they're trying to be better than they were last year, with the understanding that, we'll switch to a more competitive mode, whether it's in 2025 or 2026, whatever it may be, as Mayer and Anthony and Teal and other guys come up. But, you got to remember, Anthony has 10 games of experience at AA. Teal is only a handful of games into his professional career. Those guys are not guaranteed superstars. You need to see them succeed in AA. And this year, I think, will give the Sox a lot better of an idea of how soon those guys can contribute and how much they can contribute. And then you kind of make your other plans accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a gamble. You don't really know who's going to pan out and who's not. And that's the whole thing with relying too heavily on your prospects. Is it's great to have that talent in the farm system, guys you're excited about, that you feel like could be big contributors down the road and be successful at the major league level, but that's not always the case. And that's why it's good to have a balance of experienced guys who you know what you're getting from them, and your players internally that you feel like have that potential. Because if you're relying too much on just your young talent to develop into what you want them to be, that's a bit of a risk to take as well.
Yeah, I was really fortunate in my career. The first baseball I covered, professional baseball, was AA. And AA is the level where you figure it out, whether a guy is actually going to be good or not, because you have 2 single A teams filtering into your AA team, and you're facing guys who are all pretty much good players. So you learn a lot about your hitters and your pitchers at that level. I think even more so than AAA, because AAA has a lot of older guys who are sort of there to fill a spot. AA is all prospects for the most part. So, come in 2 months, we're going to know a lot more about Marcelo and Roman and Teal and those guys than we know about them right now. I think probably you're going to feel good about it because I think those guys are good players. But you're also going to see other guys who maybe aren't as heralded, guys who, you think, well, this guy was a high-round pick, and he might not be a good player. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out, because there's going to be a lot of interesting things going on in Portland with the guys that they have there.
Yeah, absolutely. That AA team is probably going to be very fun to follow this upcoming season. There's lots of talent down there, and it's always cool to follow some of these guys who have a lot of hype surrounding them and kind of seeing their journeys and when they do eventually make it up. But we also do have a couple other key injuries on this team going into the season, and where do the Red Sox go from here with those? That's coming up next.
Do you love sports betting? Is it something you've always envisioned yourself making a lot of money off of, or are you interested in learning more about it? If so, FanDuel is the place for you, especially with March Madness here and right around the corner. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. March Madness is the best time of year. So much unpredictability, but a lot of opportunities to win money. So check out FanDuel today if you're looking to win a lot of money. Also, as you know, Locked On has launched Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Baseball fans, though, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. EST for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. EST, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. EST on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's going to be a great time. You absolutely will not want to miss this.
Pete, we did talk about already just a lot of the question marks with the starting rotation, what that might look like, who's going to be thrown in there to start the season. But a couple other players are injured going into opening day. Vaughn Grissom likely to miss opening day. Refsnyder is injured now too. And the outfield situation has been interesting because that's actually been something that they almost have more talent in an area where they kind of have a little mix of outfielders that they could choose from. And that I've always said is a good problem to have because, you have Abreu, you have Duran, you have O'Neill, and you have Rafaela, who has had a good spring so far and is making a case for being on the opening day roster. Then you have Yoshida. So with this Refsnyder injury, do you think this pretty much solidifies Rafaela getting a spot on the opening day roster?
I mean, you certainly would think so because there really isn't any other outfielders that are knocking on the door in this case. They're talking about Bobby Dahlbeck maybe playing some outfield, and I don't know that they want to go there. So I also think that, they've said, well, Yoshida is still going to play some left field. Let's wait and see on that. I think he's going to be a DH quite a bit. I don't know how much left field. Yeah, I don't know how much left field we're going to see from him, but they have a chance to be productive in the outfield because I do think Tyler O'Neill has a lot to prove. The Cardinals basically dumped him on the Red Sox. I mean, they just was a guy they didn't want, and he was a guy who got MVP votes a few years ago and was a very good player. He's got a chance to be a Gold Glover. This is a great opportunity for a guy like William Abreu, to establish himself as a pro. It's a very big opportunity for Jarren Duran to establish himself as a major leaguer. Same thing for Ceddanne Rafaela. So those guys all have a great opportunity in front of them to really put their careers on the right track. And it's also going to be interesting because you're going to see different guys in center and left. I think it's going to be mostly O'Neill in left field, but you could see Duran over there sometimes. You could see Duran in center if Rafaela is not playing. So there's going to be, I think, a kind of a lot going on with the outfield until it settles in. So that first month of the season, you're probably going to see some different combinations. And in time, I do kind of wonder if once they figure out what they really like, if one of those guys could end up getting traded too, especially if they're out of contention and Breslow sees the opportunity to trade while someone's value is high and try to bring some more prospects into the organization.
Yeah, I've been wondering that too. Even during this offseason, I've been wondering, do we see one of these outfielders moved now, maybe for some pitching arms that they could develop in the system? And somebody like Duran, who had a great season last year, if he has another good season this year, that is somebody who I could potentially see being a trade piece if they feel like they feel confident in Abreu and Rafaela moving forward. They have some options here with the outfield, which is nice. And it's interesting you mentioned Yoshida with DH. I would prefer that. I mean, his defense was not good last year, and it would probably be best suited for the team if he gets mainly utilized as a DH now that they do have more of that outfield depth. And I am interested and intrigued by Abreu, because obviously a small sample size with him, just like Rafaela last year, we haven't gotten a sense enough yet of what they're capable of at the major league level, but both definitely showed when they got called up last year glimpses of being successful players at the major league level. So I'm excited to see how they continue to develop this year as well.
Yeah, and the other part of that is a lot of things I think will sort of be settled as we get into the season, that you can't really make those decisions now. But yeah, they do seem to have a little bit of a surplus in the outfield.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good problem for the Red Sox to have right now, because they definitely have options there. But another person who you mentioned before that they did acquire this offseason is Vaughn Grissom in a trade for Chris Sale. And has a lot of hype surrounding him as well. Definitely a lot of talent there. Somebody who could be a very good piece to the puzzle for Boston in an infield that significantly struggled on defense last year. But he is injured too, expected to miss the beginning of the season. So what do you think the infield is likely going to look like in his absence?
Obviously, Story at shortstop, Devers at third, and Casas at first base. Second base is the real question. But I do think Grissom is a shorter-term thing than a longer-term thing. That's what it sounds like. He's definitely not going to be on the opening day roster, but I don't know that he's that far away. But he hasn't been in the game yet, so it's going to take a little time. He's going to have to go on a rehab assignment, get some at-bats. But in talking to the Braves people, especially manager Brian Snitker, they love him. They thought he was an excellent player. I mean, they got Chris Sale for him. That's how much they thought of him. That, this was a guy they were only going to give up if they could get something they really needed. And, it's Chris Sale, a guy who's going to really help their rotation. And when I asked Snitker about him, he said, the first thing he said is, Vaughn Grissom is a wonderful young man, and we're sorry we lost him. And he feels like he's got a lot of good baseball to play. Now, it was weird. In spring training, they announced that he wasn't going to be able to play because of a hamstring imbalance, which I have never heard anybody say that before. And then he got over the imbalance. I don't know if he lifted more weights in one hamstring, whatever he did. And then it was, he had a groin strain reaching for a ground ball in a practice, and then he hasn't been able to play since. So he is kind of far behind. He's been doing some, working out on the side and doing some, a few more things in the last couple of days. But he's going to have to get, I would imagine, 35, 40 at-bats somewhere before they bring him back. They're not going to want to, have him go play in the cold in Worcester and Portland and take 10 at-bats and go, okay, come to Fenway Park. So this could take a little while. This might be like a, April 25th, May 1st kind of thing before you see him.
Yeah, I mean, when they traded for him, obviously they didn't know all of this was going to happen, but when they acquired him, do you think their intention initially was to have him be the opening day second baseman, or do you think they were going to kind of see how it goes with him and they knew they had players like Reyes and Valdez in the mix to kind of platoon in that position until he was ready?
I think they looked at him as he's the second baseman. I think if he was healthy, he would be the everyday second baseman, no question about it. Defensively, he'd be a big upgrade from Valdez, who really struggled at second base last year. Pablo Reyes is a utility guy. He's not an everyday second baseman. So, I think they looked at him as, this is a guy who's going to play second base for us for a long time. So, and remember, like in Atlanta, he was blocked by excellent players. I mean, Ozzie Albies and, Dansby Swanson, guys like that. I mean, it wasn't like they decided this guy couldn't play. They just decided he wasn't as good as a couple of guys who were two of the best guys at their position. So it's, this is a guy who's a lot of people think has got a chance to be a very good player. So I'm looking forward to seeing him on the field. He's a really good guy. I've enjoyed, talking to him. He seems like he's got a good personality. I think he wants to play in Boston. The other guys like him. We just haven't had a chance to see him in the game.
I know, which has been a bummer because I was so excited when the Red Sox brought him in because I said, I can't wait to watch this guy play. It seemed like they really loved him in the Braves organization, and I was just so excited to see what he could do here. And unfortunately, he just has not had the best of luck so far. But I am happy that they solved that second base problem. I mean, presumably at least, as long as he performs when he does come back, because the second base position has been a question mark for a while. They've just kind of been throwing guys in there. And I said, this is something that they need to figure out. They need to get a solidified second baseman. So that Chris Sale trade, I do feel like ultimately was best for them because it helped them solve a need that they really needed rather than having to just throw guys in like Pablo Reyes, who is a utility guy and shouldn't be used as an everyday second baseman to begin with.
Yeah, you know what's kind of funny about that is when Dustin Pedroia was playing second base, they could never find a shortstop. They were going through shortstops for years, right?
Yeah.
And then Dustin, they lose. Then Dustin gets hurt, and has to retire. Now they can't find a second baseman. They've been running through second baseman for the last 5 years without being able to find anybody. So it's kind of weird how that works. They finally found a shortstop, and then they couldn't get a second baseman. Then they traded Zan. Everything is. They've never had like the second baseman and shortstop at the same time. It's too bad. But
it's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird how that works. But Vaughn is, I don't know. I think Vaughn could be the answer. And having Story, having Grissom, having Costas, having Devers, let those guys play together for 2 months and let's see what it looks like. And I think it'll probably look pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. And Story had his struggles at the plate last year when he came back from his injury, but he fixed the infield defense significantly. They did need him when he came back defensively, and I'm hoping for a better season from him this year now that he's fully healthy. He actually got a full offseason for a change with the Red Sox, and so I'm hoping for a bigger season from Story offensively this year, and obviously his defense, just goes without saying, is something that the Red Sox really needed in the middle infield.
Yeah, I talked to Trevor yesterday for a while up in Clearwater, and he brought up a couple interesting things. He's kind of had issues with his elbow going back to 21. He gets traded to the Red Sox. He's a free agent. Then he signs with the Red Sox late in free agency, late in training camp. He's in camp for 3 days. His wife has a baby. He goes home to be with the baby, comes back and is like thrown into the regular season and doesn't have a great season because his elbow's hurting him. Then he has surgery, misses half the season. Then he comes back, kind of rushes back to try to help the team. And doesn't have a good offensive season. So he hasn't felt like himself going back like 4 years now. So he feels like he's had a normal offseason. He's had a normal spring training. You're going to see the real Trevor Story now. He feels like Red Sox fans haven't seen how, what the kind of player he can be. If he's, 85% of the guy he was in Colorado, that's a really big upgrade for the Red Sox. And I think, Trevor is a proud guy, and he wants to show people what he's about. And it was kind of a funny thing, too. His son is 2 years old now and loves baseball and loves being around. And he's like, I want my son to know that I'm a good player. Like, he's never seen me really play. And he's really fired up to, like, just kind of show people that, this was not a bad signing. He's actually a good player. So, for his sake, I hope he's able to do that.
I hope so, too. He definitely has had a tough few-year stretch there, and I think some Red Sox fans have started to almost give up on Story. But we have to remember what he was prior to all of these circumstances that happened, and that's the Trevor Story that the Red Sox signed and that we know that he can be. And he genuinely wants to be in Boston, it seems like, and I feel like he is just so ready to just have a bounce back year this year offensively. And like you mentioned, that alone is an upgrade this year that the Red Sox will be making if he does have a good season at the plate, because that's just another hitter that opposing pitchers won't want to pitch against. And I give this Red Sox lineup credit in general because these guys make pitchers work. That was something they did well with last year. They put up some competitive at-bats, and I'm really not concerned about the offense again this year. I do think they'll be able to again put up some competitive numbers offensively, especially with presumably the growth of Tristan Casas this year and how far he came last year in his first full season.
Yeah, I actually think the offense is going to be very good. Maybe, top 5 in the American League in terms of runs scored. I think they could be that good. And Casas had an at-bat the other day in Tampa against Carlos Rodon, when, he just crushed the fastball, like 421 feet to right center. Rodon's a good pitcher. And, I think Costas is really not even scratched, his potential of how good he could be. And, Devers is going to hit, if Story can become, like we were just talking about, what he was in Colorado, if, when Vaughn Grissom comes back, if you get those guys settled in the outfield, I think they've got a chance to be really, really good offensively and do some interesting things. Some more speed than they've had in the past. They can get some power back with Costas and Story. If Yoshida is a productive DH, which he was in Japan, that adds something that you didn't have last year. So of all of the things that to be concerned about with the Red Sox, I don't think the offense is one of them.
I agree with you. And with Yoshida, too, if he isn't expected to be relied upon to play as much in the outfield, it takes away some of that pressure from him of having to succeed on defense. And if he's primarily just focusing on the at-bats, I think mentally that could be good for him too, because that was a big adjustment for him last year, coming into Major League Baseball for the first time to an organization like the Boston Red Sox. That's just one of the most historic franchises in baseball, trying to get acclimated to Fenway and having to play in the outfield and take some at-bats. That's a lot to put on him. And I feel like for him coming into this year, if he's expected a lot more to just focus on the offensive side of the ball and not have to play as much defensively, he could put up some really good numbers on offense because that'll just help him to refocus himself a little bit more.
Yeah, he had a lot going on last year. The WBC was a humongous thing in Japan. They had to win. Like, it was a national thing. So he goes to a training camp with the WBC team, flies to Fort Myers, starts spring training with the Red Sox, goes back to Japan to play in the WBC, goes back to Miami to finish off the WBC, and then takes a car to Fort Myers. He showed up that day in Fort Myers. He looked like he was ready to fall over. I felt bad for the guy because he was so worn out emotionally and physically. So they give him a couple days off. The season starts, and it's like, all right, now you're going to go up to Fenway Park where it's cold, and he's used to playing in domes in Japan all the time. They don't play in the cold. And then the travel part of it, I didn't realize they have one time zone in Japan. And all of their travel, the longest road trip is like 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
There's 4 time zones. There's West Coast trips. There's coming back after a West Coast game in the middle of the night. You get home at 4:00 in the morning. You've got to try to get some sleep and then show up at Fenway Park at noon and try to play. All of that stuff you had never done before. Now the big league guys, they understand what it's like. They know how to do it. This poor guy, he was showing up at the clubhouse. He looked like he had no idea where he was sometimes, and I felt bad for him. Now he kind of gets a chance to adjust to all of that sort of thing. I think he's going to have a much better year offensively. And I think you're right. If you take away some of the responsibilities defensively, that can only help him. This was a guy who was a very good hitter in Japan. And you would like to think that after, learning what kind of the ins and outs of being a big leaguer last year, he should be a much better player. And I do think he feels like Trevor's Story, he's a good player. He's somebody who can help the team. So like Story, he's got that similar kind of motivation, I think, to show people that he's a good player.
Yeah, and I love those attitudes and that mindset that these guys have going into this year, because obviously there have been a couple players who expressed frustration during the offseason about some of the lack of moves that were made by the Red Sox front office. So coming up, I'm going to have Pete give a letter grade on the Red Sox offseason overall.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. eBay Motors is a great way to help you out with all of your car needs, especially for somebody like me who really doesn't know much about cars. So head to eBay Motors today. Also, you should head to Locked On Sports today on YouTube or Amazon Fire TV, as we have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app or on YouTube.
So we were just talking about the injuries, how this is going to affect the Red Sox on opening day, what the roster is going to look like. We mentioned how the offense is probably not going to be a problem in 2024. They might look similar to last year in terms of the competitive offensive numbers they're putting up. It primarily, again, is going to stem from the pitching. What is that going to look like? How is the season going to go? You can make or break the season essentially by this pitching staff and how they perform this upcoming season. But the Red Sox have brought in some good pieces on the coaching side to hopefully help some of these players out, but didn't necessarily do a whole lot to make the team be in a place to really contend in 2024, especially with the division they're in. So considering everything overall that you've seen this offseason from the Red Sox, Pete, what would you say is a letter grade that you would give the Red Sox offseason? Okay.
It's like my algebra grade when I was in school. Didn't everybody think that they would use their prospect depth and go out and get, whoever it was? Giolito, yeah, okay, but I thought it would be somebody a little better, like a notable guy and a notable free agent, and that they would trade for somebody who would be like a number 3 starter. They didn't really do that. And I just thought, the offense is good. They've got some guys coming back from injury. The Red Sox in the past have always reacted to bad seasons by going out and signing big names. They didn't do that. And they were never going to probably sign Yamamoto. He was probably going to go to the Dodgers the whole time. They certainly weren't going to sign Ohtani. There were things that were, I think, unrealistic to think that they would do. But there were other guys I thought they could have been in the mix with, and they weren't. So, maybe this is all part of a master plan, and Breslow, is going to figure out when to throw the switch in a couple years. But Red Sox fans are used to success, and another year where it looks like they're not as good as Baltimore and the Yankees and Toronto and Tampa Bay. So that's hard to take, and I don't blame them for being upset, and I don't blame guys like Rafi Devers for being upset. I mean, Rafi signed with this team thinking, hey, when I came up, as a rookie, we were big-time contenders. I was on a World Series team. It's hard to believe he's the last guy from that team, like the last one.
It's sad.
I mean, it's amazing. Like, there's not anybody else, and there's practically not even any. It's like him and Alex. Like, that's pretty much it, which is crazy. So I don't blame Rafi for being upset. I thought it was really mature of him to kind of represent the team and say, hey, we thought we would have more. Good for him for doing it. And that wasn't a spur of the moment thing. He came prepared to talk about his feelings, and he lined it up like a fastball and drilled it. So I just think, the players feel like more could have been done, more wasn't done, and now you have to make the best of what it is. And that could be a lot of trying to outslug teams with your offense and make up for the pitching. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because if they get off to a good start, I think Cora will be able to kind of keep things, like, hey, we got a chance. Let's keep doing things. If they get off to a bad start, it's going to be tough, because I think a lot of people in and out of the clubhouse are going to say, well, this is what we expected.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think comments that were made heading into this offseason set expectations for Red Sox fans that they were going to go out and be aggressive and make moves that they just didn't do. And it was a little, we're going full throttle. And to me, I took that as, okay, we want to contend in 2024. And I feel like that's what people expected them to do, to make moves that were going to allow them to, no doubt, be able to contend this upcoming season. And then when they did what they did and how they approached this offseason, it's almost a slap in the face. Like, why couldn't you just be upfront? Because if they were upfront and said, we don't see us contending in 2024, this is going to be a bridge year, but we have a lot of young talent that we believe in to come up and be contributors in 2025 and beyond. So we're going to use this year to set up a team like that we can sustain longer term, then the expectations would have been different, and we would have been having a different conversation about how this offseason went, because we would have expected a little bit more of what they've been doing this offseason.
Yeah, and you look at the history, right? The Red Sox had that terrible season in 2012. They went out and signed a bunch of good, free agents, veteran guys who had success, and they won the World Series. They fell apart after that. What did they do? They went out and hired Dave Dombrowski and said, okay, we're going to trade he traded the right guys, built a tremendous team, won the division in the playoffs 2 years in a row, then won the World Series with an outstanding team, like a really fun, wonderful team. Now they've fallen back and they haven't done that move like they did in the past. They haven't gone out and signed a group of free agents. They haven't added instead of a Dave Dombrowski type, they added Craig Breslow, who's more of a build from within type, and which is fine. But Red Sox fans are used to, when we come in last, they're going to come in with a big bag of money and fix it. And, that's what's going to happen. And they haven't fixed it. So, it's going to be a wait and see kind of thing. So how long they can kind of, tell people be patient. It's hard to be patient, in this town. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. I think we're going to see some games at Fenway Park in April and May when there's not going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be shocking because, this has not been a good offseason, I don't think, business-wise for the Red Sox.
Yeah, I saw something on Twitter the other day that the Red Sox posted something about how all 2024 tickets are on sale right now. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I feel like they're, just trying to get people to come to the games. And it's kind of sad because Fenway Park is such a historic place, and forever Red Sox fans just loved going there and watching this team play. And it's just sad where we're at now and having this conversation of, we might not see a lot of people at Fenway for those first couple months. And I mean, rightfully so. People are disappointed about how this offseason went, and I really don't blame them. I just think there was a lot of misconception and miscommunication on the part of the Red Sox front office about what to expect. And I just don't think it was a good offseason. I'm excited for the development of some guys that we talked about, but they're in a tough division, and I just don't expect them to be able to be at the same level as some of those other teams.
Yeah, the Red Sox are not very good at messaging. They don't do a good job of sort of communicating to their fans what they want to do. It's a lot of different messages that get lost, and that's been a problem. They need somebody to sort of, figure out what the message is and effectively communicate that message. And I think the other thing that, I grew up in Massachusetts and went to Fenway Park a million times when I was a kid. The thing that was very strange for me last year was seeing how many games that there were as many fans of the other team at Fenway as there were of the Red Sox. When the Mets came to town, they filled up the entire right field grandstand. When teams like the Cubs and the Cardinals have come into town, when the Yankees have come into town, there's been a ton of, Aaron Judge pinstripe jerseys walking around, Yawkey Way. And like, how is it possible? And that to me is, and maybe the Red Sox look at it like, oh, hey, their money is like anybody else's money. They're buying beer and hot dogs too. That's fine. But it's got to be disturbing if you're a Red Sox player and, you walk into Fenway Park and there's 10,000 Mets fans at right field. I mean, that's like what the Red Sox used to do in Baltimore and what the Red Sox used to do in Tampa Bay. You'd go to Camden Yards and it would be all Red Sox fans. You go to Tampa Bay, it would be all Red Sox fans. It's going to be a little difficult if you're Alex Cora, who remembers what it was like to walk into the park and see, there's Cubs fans everywhere. That part of it, I think, the Red Sox need to kind of get that changed. And you can only do that by being successful. And, maybe what they're doing this year will lead them down that road. But I do think there's going to be some interesting nights, especially early in the season. Maybe everybody will be home watching the Celtics and Bruins. I don't know. Maybe that might be the only hope.
Maybe, especially if those two teams are in the playoffs, which the Celtics already clinched a playoff spot. So maybe that will be what the case ends up being. But, I will still enjoy watching games just because I love watching baseball in general. But it might be a long season for us Red Sox people out there. So it might be tough. But hopefully they are able to just prove us all wrong and say to all of us in a couple of years, like I told you so, this is what we were trying to do. But it's hard to really see the exact vision right now still. And I just hope that they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I always joke, I can tell how the team is doing by how often my bosses call me. And when the team is going well, I get a lot of calls. What are we going to do tomorrow? Let's talk about how we're going to do this. And when they're not doing well, I get like a text message. Everything good? Yeah, okay. But, make sure you're going to the park and whatever you want to do is fine. Yeah, it's interesting from my standpoint too, because I want people to read what I write. I don't want everybody reading about the Patriots. I want people to read my stuff. So it's it's weird. It's a little weird because I've been really fortunate. I've covered some great Red Sox teams, and it's a lot more fun for us when they're good too, because everybody wants to read what we're writing. So hopefully there's something interesting to write about.
Yeah, let's hope so. Hopefully we can find some silver linings and positive storylines in this season. But Pete, this was an absolute pleasure having you on here with me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, you get to see the elaborate Boston Globe condominium here in Fort Myers. As you can see, it's very, very nice. We have stairs over there, and we have a TV that doesn't work. That's very exciting. We have a sliding glass door that goes out to a pond. So yeah, we're living a very high life here in Fort Myers. So.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
we have solo cups, everything. Yeah, it's all really great. So.
Well, I mean, the weather is probably amazing because just from watching spring training games, I'm like, it looks so nice down there.
Yeah, the weather has been really, actually, it's been really great, and Fort Myers is it's fun because people, it's everybody here is a Red Sox person, so it's been good. Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's cool. That's cool. I need to make it down to spring training soon. I haven't gotten a chance to go yet, and hopefully next year. But thank you so much again for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, everybody, as always, for tuning into the show. Go Red Sox, and I will catch you next time.